I think I've met 2 psychopaths in my life, and unfortunately one of them is actually probably married to my friend. And I don't mean psycho as in like, oh, he's crazy, he's like violent. I mean like, you probably have bitches chopped up in your basement. Like, would not shock me at all. I met him when I was living on the East Coast for a year. I did not like him the moment I met him. Hairs on the back of my neck, standing up, creepy, weird. I really didn't like him. When I found out some stories about him, basically my friends were friends with his girlfriend, and she went to a different school, but she would tell them that they had this like sexual fantasy that they would play out where she would hide somewhere in her house and he would act like an intruder. She would turn off all of her lights, he would act like an intruder and drag her out of her hiding place, and she would be like kicking and screaming. This man had like defensive wounds on his body, like scratches and shit. And I'm asking my friends, I'm like, is this consensual? Like, are we sure that this is consensual, just knowing the nature of him and how he's like manipulative and a liar? And they're like, well, she said it is. And I'm like, well, did you like really ask her? Like, are we like making her feel comfortable? That wasn't really their MO. And so I never knew about what happened there. They end up breaking up. Worst case scenario, he ends up really wanting to go after one of my friends, who is like the most innocent human on the entire planet. Mind you, this is her freshman year of college. She has not drank. She's not had her first kiss. She has not had sex, okay? She's religious. She doesn't want to do any of these things because she feels guilty, right? She still believes in this religion. And so he's pressuring her to have sex. And I'm like, dude, stop doing that. I literally tell him, I'm like, you know she doesn't want to do that. If you actually care about her, you'll respect her wishes and you'll stop trying to make her. And he's like, she's a big girl. She can decide. I'm like, you're right. She is a big girl and she can decide, but you're coercing her. It's different. And he was like, I don't care. I'm like, oh my fucking God. But this man is also like serially cheating on her, right? Like, we hear stories and stuff, but like never have any evidence. Finally, one of my friends, very close, lived with me, saw him cheating on her, literally witnessed with her own 2 eyes. And so I'm like, perfect, you're gonna tell her, right? Because we're both friends with her. And she goes, no. I'm like, why the fuck not? And she's like, well, because I'm friends with him too. First of all, who the fuck cares? Second of all, you should tell her. And she's like, no, I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. I'm like, well, can I tell her then? And she's like, sure. So I end up telling her. I call her into my room. I'm like, hey girl, I have from a very credible source, mind you, the source is sitting next to me, that your man was making out with a girl last night and she watched him make out with her for like 5 minutes in the front lawn. And then actually he ended up bringing her home to his dorm room. She might be in there right fucking now. And she's like, oh my God, who told you? And I'm like, actually, unfortunately, I can't tell you. They asked not to be named. And mind you, the source is sitting next to me, right? And she's like, well, it would really make a difference if I could just talk to that person. I'm like, well, that person doesn't want you to know who they are. So unfortunately, I can't tell you. Fucking crickets from this stupid bitch, right? And so she ends up running over to his dorm room to see if the bitch is still there. The bitch has left. She found evidence of the girl being there, okay? But he somehow manipulates her, tells her this crazy ass story, tells her that I'm a fucking liar and that I'm making all this shit up. And why would she believe me saying some random person saw it and not believe her actual boyfriend telling her? And I'm just like, I can only do so much. And so this like source is friends with this man, right? And so he's in our dorm room kicking his feet and like laughing and joking with her on the bed. And I'm fuming. I'm like, I don't even know how you can look at this man. He's literally such a fucking asshole. And he turns around and he looks at me and goes, so I heard that you told her that I cheated on her. And like smiles. And I'm like, yeah, I did. Why the fuck did you do that? And he was like, honestly, I don't really care. Like, I'm just trying to like have sex because she won't do it. I'm like, oh my God. And then I'm like, well, I'm going to keep fucking telling her. And he laughs and he goes, you really think she'll ever believe you? She will always believe me over you. And gives me like the most chilling, sinister, evil fucking smile I have ever fucking seen. Dead in his eyes. I swear to God. I was looking at that man and I'm like, I can't convince you to give a shit about being a good person. You're actually just fucking crazy. And it goes on like this for years. Literally years and years and years. He ends up like psychologically torturing her. He just treats her like shit. She's constantly nervous. She's always on edge. She's crying all the time. She's depressed. She wants to go home. It was like so fucked up to watch. And it pisses me off that like this source never told, because like you could have saved her. She is now married to this man. She's now married to this man and she will probably stay with him forever. And so if your friends are in a bad situation, make sure you check in on them. Make sure you're honest with them. Obviously, they will only leave when they're ready, but like try to be as accountable as you can. And girl, if you're watching this, you know who you are. I hope you're doing okay, and you can always call me.
What would you do if your husband came home from work early and sat down at the kitchen table, but then you get a call from your real husband? This is Scared with Jess, and today's story is about a woman who said that something came into her house, but it wasn't her husband. I was making dinner when I heard the front door open. At first, that didn't bother me. My husband had texted earlier saying work was busy, though every now and then he'd get out early. It happened. I was at the stove, half paying attention to the pasta, half thinking about whether we still had enough garlic bread for both of us, and when I heard his shoes in the hallway, I called out, "You're home early." He didn't answer. That was the first thing that got under my skin. Usually he'd respond right away. Even if he was tired, even if he was in a mood, he'd say something. And this time I just heard a pause and then one quiet, flat, "Yeah." I turned around and he was standing in the kitchen doorway looking at me. The same work shirt and the same face, but something still in me tightened up. He didn't come over, he didn't kiss my cheek, he didn't drop his bag by the wall like he usually does. He just stood there watching me like he was trying to remember what I'd look like from that angle. I laughed a little because I felt silly for even noticing and said, "Everything okay?" He asked, "Did anyone call today?" I said no. And then he asked, "Did you unlock the back door?" I remember blinking at him because the question was so strange. I said, "What?" He asked again in the same voice and same expression. I said, "No, I hadn't." Then he said, "Did you tell anyone I live here?" That was when my stomach dropped. I asked him what he was talking about, and he didn't answer. He came into the kitchen, pulled out a chair, and sat at the table. He folded his hands in front of him and looked at me. I turned the stove off, and I didn't think about it. I just did it. Then my phone rang. I looked down at the screen, and the blood left my face. It was my husband. At the table, the thing wearing him smiled. I answered the call with my hand shaking so hard I nearly lost the grip on my phone. And he said, "Hey, I'm leaving now. I should be home in 20." I couldn't speak. Then he said, "Why are you whispering?" I looked over at the kitchen table, and it was still sitting there in his chair with that same little smile, waiting. I said as quietly as I could, "If you're not home, who is sitting in my kitchen?" He went silent, and I could hear traffic behind him for a second. Then he said, sharp enough to cut right through me, "What?" The thing at the table stood up, slowly. It never broke eye contact with me. Then it turned and walked towards the stairs. I watched it go because I could not make my legs work. It moved like it knew the house, like it had already been there a while. My husband kept saying my name through the phone, and I finally whispered, "It's going upstairs." That stopped him. I heard his car door slam on his end. Then he said, "Get out of the house right now." I still wasn't moving. He shouted it again louder, "Get out right now." From upstairs, I heard footsteps begin, heavy and slow, one after another above my head. I backed towards the front door without taking my eyes off the staircase. I asked him, "If that's not you, who is upstairs?" He was quiet for a second, and then he said, "I left the attic ladder down this morning." I ran. I didn't take my purse, I didn't grab my keys from the hook, I just yanked the front door open and bolted barefoot across the yard to my neighbor's porch. I was pounding on their door, and my husband got there in maybe 10 minutes. He went in first, and my neighbor went with him. They checked every room, but nobody was there. The attic ladder was down. That part was true. Nothing in the attic either, at least not that they found. Just insulation in boxes and some old Christmas stuff that we keep up there. My husband kept asking if I was sure I hadn't fallen asleep or mixed something up or had somebody come by who left before he got there. I didn't blame him for trying to make sense of it. I would have done the same thing. But on the kitchen table, right where that thing had been sitting, there was a damp handprint. And when my husband pushed the attic ladder back up, something moved across the top of it. Definitely wasn't a rat or settling wood. I mean, it was a shift of weight. He stopped with both hands still on the ladder and looked up into the opening. I saw his face change. He pulled the ladder shut fast enough to make the ceiling shake. We stayed in a hotel that night, and he still doesn't talk much about what he thought he saw up there, which tells me he did see something. I also never told him one part. When I was standing in the kitchen with him on the phone and that thing was walking towards the stairs, it passed the hall mirror, and for a second I could see its reflection. It was still my husband's body, but the face wasn't his anymore. Anyway, good luck sleeping tonight.
When I was 37 years old, I ended up going to my high school reunion. I flew into the nearest airport and rented a car to drive the remaining 35 miles to the venue. On my way to the venue, when I'm about 3 miles outside of town, I see a man trying to flag me down on the side of the road. My first instinct was to, of course, ignore him until I realized that I knew who the guy was. His name was Jim, and I had actually gone to high school with him. I decided to stop and give him a ride. Once Jim got in, I noticed that he was only a bit older, but not much had changed with him. We chatted and had a little bit of small talk, and then I asked if he was gonna come to the high school reunion. He responded with, "No, just take me home." I remember where his parents lived, so I started to drive him towards that direction when he told me to stop and pointed me to the complete opposite. We ended up driving down this long, winding road that ended up at a mobile park. He ended up thanking me for giving him the ride and said that it was nice to see me. I said the same. He got out of the car and I went on my way. I get to the high school reunion, I start to talk to my old classmates about the people that are there and who's gonna come and what everybody has been up to. I mentioned that I had just seen Jim that day and had given him a ride to his house. The minute I said that, everybody grew quiet. Even the karaoke person put the mic down and completely became silent. Then one of my friends goes, "Jim died 2 years ago on that curb that you described dropping him off at. We were all at his funeral." This is reason number 1 as to why you should always be very careful when inviting anyone into your home, even family. So for those of you guys who follow me on here, you already know that my father and I don't have the best relationship. Recently, I found out that he had a baby, so I reached out. We ended up reuniting. I met the baby and decided to invite them over to my house for dinner. Mind you, my home is extremely protected, so if anybody comes in with any type of negativity around them, they're not gonna feel well. So he comes over. The minute he walks in, he starts to become ill. He said he felt like he was gonna faint, that he didn't know what was going on. They ended up cutting their visit short and practically rushed out of the door. I didn't think much of it and just decided to go on with my day. The next day, which was on Sunday, I woke up in the worst possible mood. I couldn't understand why I was in such a bad mood. I had absolutely no reason to feel so angry, but something was just really bothering me. I decided to take the kids to go watch the new Spider-Man to kind of get my mind off of it. Once I left the house, I realized that I no longer felt like that anger. Like, it was gone and I felt fine. But the minute we went back home, I started to feel angry again. Decided to ignore it. I don't know why I keep ignoring things. Decided to ignore it, went about my day. That Monday I wake up, when I go downstairs, I notice that the house is dark. Like, there's this darkness around the house. My house is extremely light. My shades are always open. I don't like darkness. But again, busy with work, I kind of just get ready and go about my day. When I get home later on that day, the house has this weird, like, rotting smell. My kids can't smell it, but I can smell it, and it's bothering me. So I go around cleaning the house. I'm like bleaching, I'm scrubbing, I'm mopping. I'm like, where's that smell coming from? I even like deep clean the trash can, like in the inside, thinking maybe something spilled in there. I couldn't get the smell from like out of my nose. That night I go to bed and I end up waking up at exactly 3 a.m. So I'm like, fun, this is fun. I'm like getting chills even thinking about it. My mouth is so freaking dry. I go downstairs to get something to drink. When I go downstairs, I notice that the basement door is open. I never leave that door open. So I shut it, grabbed the water, and went back to my room. The minute I lay down, I'm paralyzed. This thing paralyzes me, and it shows itself. I'm like fighting back. Again, I'm not afraid of any of this stuff because I've been dealing with this stuff my whole life. So I'm pretty much laughing at it, telling it that it has no power, it needs to leave. I start to pray, and it's continuing to like hold me down. At one point, I'm able to break free and I like overpower this thing. I have one of those Stanley cups, the dupe, not the real one. I'm not spending $40 on a cup. Next to my nightstand, and I started to hit it in the head with it. Once I did this, it went away. I say my prayers and go to sleep. I wake up at about 6 a.m. and decide to go downstairs to get my coffee. When I go downstairs into the kitchen, I hear what sounds like something like fumbling in the basement, like something's falling over in the basement. And then I look and realize that the basement door is open. I used to babysit for a wealthy family, but their baby didn't sleep, and that was actually the least creepy thing about him. I have reason to believe that he was something or someone much older. This spooky scary story time was submitted by Rachel, and she says back in the 1990s, she was home from school break for the summer, and she answered a White Pages ad for a family in Belmead, Tennessee that was looking for an experienced babysitter, and they required references, but they also paid extremely well. It was $20 an hour, which back then was like winning the lottery. If you're new here, this is Spooky Scary Storytime, the series where we share listeners' allegedly true stories about the creepiest or most unsettling things that they've ever experienced. And Rachel says she was 19 when this all happened. She answered the ad she knew about Belmead because Belmead is old money, like real old money, with winding streets and stone houses that look like they've been there since the Civil War, with ivy climbing up the sides. I live in Nashville. I can attest to this. But Rachel knew of the area, even though she didn't live in Belmead, because her grandmother used to clean houses in Belmead in the 1970s. She answers the ad and she calls and she leaves a message on the family's answering machine. And the family calls back the same day, and on the phone is the mother, and she sounds sort of nice, but also very professional and sharp. And the mother asks if Rachel has experience with infants, and Rachel says she does. And she says, okay, cool, it pays $25 an hour in cash. And Rachel says, oh, the ad says 20. And the woman says, okay, well, we can do 20 if you want. And Rachel's like, well, no, I'll take the 25. And she's like, I felt like I knew that money was not an issue for these people at all. But the woman says that they want to meet her before they agree to let her babysit their child, which is understandable. So Rachel goes out to their house the following day. Rachel pulls up to this massive Tudor-style mansion, and she said it had original stained windows, and when she stepped inside, it smelled like old books. There were bookshelves lining the walls. There was fine art hung in beautiful frames all over. The place was spotless. The dad answered the door, and he was gray-haired, and he looked powerful and clean-cut and important. He says, oh, my wife handles these things, and he calls for his wife, and she comes down this wooden winding staircase, and she's got a bob, and she's wearing like a power suit. Finds out that the dad is an attorney and the mother is in politics. She's not a politician, but she works with politicians. And also all around the house are photos with them with like senators, a vice president, and even some foreign leaders that Rachel recognized from the news. Said being in this house was unlike anywhere she's ever been before, and it was a lot. But they were nice enough, and they're telling her that they're looking for someone for Friday nights because they either want to have date night or they have other commitments, and can she be available? And they're always home by 10 p.m. Need her for like 3 or 4 hours every Friday. And she's like, perfect, I can make that work. And they're like, cool, let's meet the infant. Which, mind you, they called him the infant. They did not call him by name. She thinks that's a little odd, but she follows him upstairs, and they walk inside the nursery, and he's in this antique-looking crib. An 8-month-old baby boy, he's wide awake, he's sitting up in the crib, and he's got these huge dark eyes that are just staring at her when they enter the room. She walks over, she says some baby talk, like, hi, what a little cutie, or something like that. The baby did not smile, he didn't fuss, he just stared at her, and the mother kind of laughs, and she's like, oh, he's a little bit socially awkward, or something like that. She kind of explains his behavior away, and Rachel's like, okay, well, what about bedtime? Like, do you guys have him on a sleep schedule, or what's going on? And the mom says, no, he doesn't really sleep. She says, don't worry too much about bedtime. We're not really concerned about that. We'll handle it when we get home. We're always home by 10. So she goes, oh, okay, that's fine. And she goes, what's his name? And both the parents start to say a different name at the same time, and they kind of give each other a look. Mom says, oh, his name is very formal. We just call him Thomas, which is not the real name of this child, but I'm just inserting a name for storytelling's sake. But it's something generic like that. So the dad says, does everything sound good? Can you be available this Friday? And Rachel says, sure. And he's like, perfect. We'll see you then. So Rachel pulls up at 5:45 on Friday to start her shift at 6. She walks in. The father hands her an envelope full of $200 cash for incidentals, he says, for her few hours pay and to order a pizza because he says they don't keep food in the house because they eat out a lot. She's like, perfect. They're out the door. She goes up in the room. The baby's still sitting up in his crib, just staring at her. She says she took him out. She read him a book. She played with him. And the entire time, he didn't smile. He didn't fuss. He didn't make a sound. She noticed that he didn't really like to be held. It didn't seem like it anyway, because anytime she picked him up, he would sort of go stiff in her arms. And the only thing that he seemed to care about was a weird little carved pendant that he wore on a leather cord around his neck. At first glance, Rachel thought it was a teething toy. She had seen such a thing on other babies that she had babysat for, but never one that looked like this, because this was a strange little symbol carved into what seemed like stone with too many teeth and weird symbols carved into the sides. She didn't know what the symbols were, but she thought it reminded her of something from National Geographic. Like ancient hieroglyphs, but she was like, rich people buy weird things for their babies. I don't know what this is. Maybe it's an antique. But this baby clung to this thing like it was his lifeline. Parents hadn't left any instruction as to how to feed him, so she goes to the kitchen and she's rummaging around, and she notices in the refrigerator there is literally just a bottle of red wine, which she thought was odd to be in the refrigerator, and some old takeout. But the dad did say that they ate out a lot, but she was looking for something to give to this baby, but she found a few jars of unopened baby food, and she tried to feed it to him, and the baby turned his head away like he didn't want anything to do with it.
Eventually, when she realized that he wasn't responding to the food or any way that she was trying to play with him, she decided to sing him a lullaby because she was like, all babies sleep eventually. But he did not. He just stared at her. Eventually, the parents got home no later than 10 p.m., as they said. They told her to keep the rest of the money and, can you be here next Friday? And she said, sure, I'll see you then. And they said, perfect, same time. Following Friday, when she arrived, she asked them about his feeding schedule, and they said the same thing. Oh, he doesn't really eat much. And she's like, he doesn't eat much? And the mom says, no, he's breastfed. It's really the only thing he likes. She's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And she's like, he's just a picky eater. That's also why he doesn't sleep. Rachel accepted this explanation because she was like, I've never raised a child myself. I don't know how this goes. But every time she watched a child from that point on, it was the same. He never ate, he never slept, he just stared at her. Over the next few weeks, she noticed a few things that seemed even more strange about this baby besides his eating and sleeping habits, which were once he dropped his little pendant teething toy and she picked it up and she was looking at it, inspecting it a little bit closer, and he seemed to growl at her. She said it was something guttural. It didn't seem like a noise that I've ever heard a baby make, but it really seemed to bother him that she was holding on to this toy. Another time, she had put him down in his crib, hoping that by some miracle he would fall asleep, and she closed the nursery door behind her and was walking down the hall when she heard a whispering coming from his room. She paused to listen, and it sounded like two people were talking in the room. She peeped her head back in, and he was still just sitting up in the crib staring at her. That freaked her out, but she thought she just imagined it. Another night, about 2 weeks before she quit, a man showed up at the door, and she answered the door. There was a guy standing in what looked to be an old suit. He said he was tall, he was pale, with intense green eyes, and he asked about the boy. She says, I'm sorry, I don't really feel comfortable letting a stranger in the house. The parents are gone. And he says, okay, well, tell the parents that their debt is still unpaid. And she says, okay, well, who should I tell them stop by? And he said, I'm just an old family friend. I'm just here to check on the air. They'll know who you're talking about. Before he turns to leave and get in an old town car, he says, tell them that the arrangement can't last forever. When the parents get home that night, Rachel relays the message, and the parents look at each other and they seem concerned, and they say, okay, thank you for letting us know. The night that made Rachel finally quit was a Friday night about 2 weeks later when she was working, and the parents actually called the house phone, which was a landline, and they told her, hey, our charity event is running a little bit late. Are you okay with staying until 1 a.m.? Father's like, there's an extra $100 in it for you. And Rachel's like, yeah, of course. It's like 12:50 a.m. She's waiting for the parents to get home. She's sitting on the couch downstairs and the landline starts ringing, and she goes to answer it, but it stops ringing. But then she hears a separate line start ringing, and it sounded like it was coming from upstairs. And she was like, does this house have two phone lines? So she starts walking up the stairs and she realizes that the ringing is coming from the baby's room. She had noticed that there was an old rotary phone in the baby's room, but had never paid it attention. She thought it was more for decoration. She had left the baby alone, thinking maybe he would go to sleep since it was so late in the night. But she creeps down the hall, she props open the door, and she looks at the crib, and the baby's not in the crib. But instead, he's standing in the corner, standing up, which she had never seen him do, talking on the phone, and he's whispering in a language that was not English. She said, I don't know if it was Latin, but it sounded like something super old. As I'm standing there staring at this baby talking on the phone, he turns his head around 180 degrees and looks at me. What was even creepier is that he smiled for the first time since she started babysitting him. He said, I could not believe what I was seeing, so I just slowly backed up. I closed the door behind me and I walked back downstairs to sit on the couch because the parents were supposed to be home within the next 15 minutes and they'd never been late before. Said she was sitting back on the couch in the living room trying to make sense of what she just saw when she heard the nursery door creak open. She looks upstairs and on the landing can see the child now walking down the hallway headed for the stairs. And then he proceeds to walk down the stairs as if he were an adult. And his eyes are locked on her this whole time and he's smiling at her as he does it. And he gets to the bottom and she says, what do you want? And he says, everything. He said the pendant around his neck seemed to be glowing as he said it. And said she jumped up. She didn't know what to do. She was about to make a run for it because now she's afraid of this child when the door swings open and the parents walk in and the baby drops to his knees. Went back to his normal dead stare. The mom rushes over to him. She picks him up. She's like, oh, you guys are practicing crawling. She was almost yelling at this point. She's like, he was just walking. He just walked down the stairs. And the dad looks at his watch and says, no, he doesn't walk at this hour. Which is also a very strange thing to say. Dad says, sorry, we're late, here's that extra 100 for you. And Rachel says that he probably knew from the look on her face that something was wrong because he's like, is everything okay? He says, but how do you tell someone that their child just scared you to the point of wanting to run out of the house? She called to quit the next day. They didn't ask any questions, just said that they were sorry to see her go. A few years later, she did see their family portrait in the news because they had launched a new charity organization in the state that made a bunch of headlines, but in the story there was oddly no mention of that child, and she said she still wonders about it. She did tell her grandmother about the whole situation, who cleaned houses in the area, and her grandmother didn't seem bothered by it. She said, oh, you would not believe what I've seen cleaning those houses in the 70s. She said, those people don't make their money like you and I'll tell you that much. Rachel says that's the story that she hasn't told in years because who would believe her anyway?